Thank you for coming to Lassen National Park. I'm going to give you a little tour of some of the volcanic areas and talk about the story of eruptions in this park. So most people that come to visit here know that this is a volcanic area and that it's still volcanically active, but a lot of people don't realize that there's been actual eruptions pretty recently in the past here, and there's the potential for future eruptions as well. And this park is also unique in its volcanic activity because of the kind of volcanoes that are in this park, and we'll get to more of that later. So there was a fairly recent eruption in 1915 in this park, and here's a picture of that eruption. This is an eruption of Lassen Peak, and so as we walk along here, we'll see some of the results of this volcanic activity as we talk about the effects that the eruptions have had on this area and what the future might hold. So this area has been volcanically active for over 3 million years, so it's quite a while, and it's changed a lot of the landscape around here. And it's also a unique area because there are actually all 4 types of volcano right in this area, and there are only a few places on Earth where this occurs. So these 4 types of volcanoes are cinder cone, stratovolcano, also known as composite volcano, shield volcanoes, and plug domes. So cinder cones are formed from explosive lava erupting from a single vent, and as it erupts, the lava shatters into small pieces, which are then harden in the air and fall as cinders, and this forms a very circular dome shape as the cinders fall, and the cinders are made of very light basalt rock. And so that's one kind of volcano here. Another kind is the composite or stratovolcano, and these are steep-sided volcanoes that are formed when there are multiple eruptions that deposit layers of lava, ash, and cinders. So there's various types of rock in these volcanoes. They're very steep-sided, very symmetrical. It's what most people picture when they think of volcanoes in the Cascade Range, which of course Lassen Park is in the southernmost part of the Cascade Range of volcanoes. And the next type is the shield volcano. It's the kind of volcano that Mauna Loa on Hawaii is. They're usually the largest volcano, and they're formed by fluid lava that builds up gradually from many lava flows. They're very broad, very sloping, and as I said, typically very large, so those are in the park as well. And the last kind of volcano is a plug dome volcano, and this is a volcano that's formed kind of from within, and it's formed by the expansion of lava inside the volcano, and as it expands, the outside hardens and cools, and as it hardens and cools, it shatters and causes many eruptions that way. So the largest volcano in this park is a plug dome volcano, and it's actually one of the largest on Earth. It's at 10,457 feet, and we can see this plug dome volcano over here. And I have with me a model of the 4 different kinds of volcano, so I can pass that around and everyone can kind of look at the different shapes that these volcanoes are, and then as they go around the park on their visit, they can see if they can identify all 4 types of those volcanoes. So as I said, there was a pretty recent eruption in 1915, and you might be wondering which kind of volcano it was that erupted. Well, the volcano over here is the one that had that eruption, and that's Mount Lassen Peak, and it is a plug dome volcano. So that's the the one responsible for that recent eruption. So in May of 1915, Lassen Peak erupted, and it's the southernmost of all of the volcanoes in the Cascade Range. Caused a lot of devastation in nearby areas, and ash from this eruption came down 280 miles away. So it was not among the largest volcanic eruptions in the Cascade Range, but it was still fairly large. And it was part of a series of eruptions that lasted from 1914 to 1917, and until Mount St. Helens in Washington erupted, it was the most recent eruption in the Cascade Range. So one of the aspects of this eruption was that it was kind of the first time that people had been able to get photographs of a volcanic eruption, and so it was very publicized by the media in California, and so there are a lot of photographs of it, and I have some photographs here of that eruption for you guys to look at. And so the first thing that happened was there was a large explosion on the summit, which triggered a lot of avalanches. This was one of the first El Nino year in this area, so there had been over 30 feet of snow. There was a lot of snow on the sides, and those avalanches and then the heat from the explosion caused a lot of that snow to melt. And this turned into really devastating mud flows that flowed into surrounding lakes and streams and areas. The area was settled, but people had some warning, and no one was killed in the eruption. So there's a few quiet days after that eruption, and then there's another massive eruption that hurled rock fragments and pumice, and also caused a huge column of volcanic ash and gas that rose 30,000 feet into the air and was visible 150 miles away. So and this caused a lot of pyroclastic flow to go down the sides of the mountain, further devastating surrounding areas. So there's pretty vigorous activity in this area over the next couple decades. And while now things have calmed down a lot and Mount Lassen is currently quiet, experts say that the eruptions are probably far from over. So as I said, for several years after the eruption of Mount Lassen in 1915, when snow would melt on Mount Lassen and would percolate down into the soil, this would trigger a lot of steam explosions, which indicated that it was still really hot below the surface and that it was still very active. After a couple decades, this activity kind of tapered off, and Mount Lassen is now considered dormant. But as you can see, as we walk along this trail, there's still a lot of obvious activity happening here. So we've been seeing steam vents and hot springs and bubbling mud pots, and these are all indications that this area as a whole is far from quiet. And experts say it's certain that the Lassen area will experience more eruptions in the future. It's just not known exactly when. This period, if you look at the history of volcanic activity, this area experiences long periods of dormancy that are then followed by periods of a lot of eruptions, multiple eruptions in a somewhat long space of time. So they anticipate that we might still be in the middle of one of those time periods of eruptions, and that this means that it's still possible that there's going to be future eruptions at Lassen National Park, which will further change the landscape even more than it's already been changed by past eruptions. And I have for you here's some examples of the different kinds of volcanic rocks you can find in this area. So if you want to take a look at these, and feel. Some of them are very light, some of them are very heavy, and all of these came from that 1915 eruption. So this is a very beautiful area, and it's very unique, and most of that has been caused by those volcanic eruptions. And since it was not a huge eruption, you can see there's a lot of vegetation here, a lot of the mountains and the rock around has eroded a lot, creating soil for this vegetation to grow, and that makes this area really beautiful. And like I said, the last major eruption took place in 1915 and was very active for decades after that. The area itself is still active here, as you can see, but Lassen Peak itself is dormant, and it's not known whether it could erupt again soon or later, but geologists are keeping an eye on that to give people in the area warning if it was to erupt again, or if one of the other volcanoes in this area was to erupt. But for now, as you can see, this area is recovering, and I have for you here a picture showing what it looked like after the eruption and what it looks like now, and how much the vegetation in the surrounding area has recovered. But it's good to keep in mind, this area is still really active. Cascade Range in general is still active, and it's good to be prepared for any future volcanic activity that might happen.